Hey Dev Nation, today I have the pleasure of interviewing Brant Menswar. We discuss concepts from his book Black Sheep, Unleash the Extraordinary, Awe-Inspiring, Undiscovered You. We take a look at how he has used his black sheep values during his worst decision ever, how you can begin to form your own black sheep, the importance of finding balance in both your feelings and your black sheep values, and more. I hope you gain value out of today's experience. Make sure to follow and leave a review on today's discussion. Enjoy. All right, hey guys, hey Brant, how you doing?
I'm
All
doing
good?
not bad. About yourself, bud?
All good. Yeah, definitely. Excited, finally doing this. Excited.
It's been a minute. I
It
know it's
has.
early, so I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I appreciate you taking the time. Really do. So if you could just go ahead and just pretty much introduce yourself and then who you are, as well as just introduce your book, Black Sheep, right up there.
Yeah, love it. So my name is Brant Menswar. I am a keynote speaker and author of the book Black Sheep, Unleash the Extraordinary, Awe-Inspiring, Undiscovered You, which is all about helping people discover their non-negotiable values.
Mhm. And could you actually go into a little bit of detail on you mentioned the flock of five?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Ryan, I was 47 years old before somebody explained to me why farmers don't actually value black sheep like the rest of the flock. I think we're all familiar with the connotation of being a black sheep and an outcast, but a lot of that sort of mindset is based in a lie. The truth is, the reason that farmers don't value black sheep is because a black sheep's wool cannot be dyed. So a black sheep can't be made into something that it wasn't meant to be. In fact, they are 100% authentically original. And so when I heard that, that is literally my life's goal, is to be that 100% authentic, unique creation that I was made to be. And so I believe that we all possess a flock of 5 black sheep values. These are these deeply held, non-negotiable personal core values that no matter how much someone wants to try to influence you or change your mind, they simply can't be moved like a black sheep's wool. And that is the concept of the book, is helping you discover what your flock of 5 black sheep values actually are. It teaches you to prove them that they are indeed your sheep and you're not caring for someone else's. And then it teaches you how to speak them into existence, right? It's not just about knowing what matters most. It's about using those values to change what's possible in your life.
Definitely. I know you mentioned a lot of and like intentional manifestation and things like that. So yeah, definitely. Um from there, how would you say if for someone who hasn't necessarily read the book, just I guess
Yeah.
a first sort of step towards finding perhaps your first sheep out of the five, let's say.
Sure. Yeah. It's interesting. There's several different ways that you can go about sort of discovering what your core values are.
Mhm.
Core values are developed over the course of our lives. And by the time you're in your early 20s, they're pretty much well established, right? And outside of a catastrophic event in your life, they simply don't change. I think people feel like they change, but the truth is that they just haven't discovered what they actually are, and so they believe that it's something when indeed it's something else. And for most of us, we don't do the work, so we have to live 20, 30, 40 years worth of life to start to sort through and sift
Okay.
through the things that are really important to us. And
Mhm.
that's where I find most of us are these days. At least in my experience and data from the people that we work with, it's less than 1% of the people who could
Okay.
sit there and tell you specifically, here are my 5 non-negotiable values. Here's why I chose them. Here's examples from my past to prove that they're real. We just don't do that work because it's easier to wing it.
Mhm.
And there are many of us who feel like they're bad at winging it, but that's again, that's just not true. They're actually real. We are very adept at winging it as humans, and the fact that you're alive, it shows you just how much. So,
Yeah.
you know, the idea for how you can get there, how do you discover? These are things that Maslow would call peak experiences. Our values are often born from these peak experiences in our lives. So when you sort of go back in your mind over the course of your life and you think about the experiences that have had the most profound impact on you, they can be both positive or negative. And sometimes our values are born from either. And so you might have a really powerful moment, positive moment that you go, gosh, that really helped shape my beliefs in this particular area. And there are other times that you go, gosh, I had this horrible experience and I never want it to happen again. I never want to be that type of person. I never want to exhibit that type of behavior. And so it also shapes the values. We've actually created and crafted a online assessment, and
Yes,
we did it
I did
as
take
a
that.
yeah, good. So
Hmm.
we did it as a sort of dipping your toe in a very deep pool. So it's not the be all end all. It is not something that is going to be, here's the absolute truth. What it does is it gets you thinking about what you believe your non-negotiable values are. And so it presents you with 125 commonly held core values. And it says, in a knee-jerk sort of reaction, go ahead and read these words. If the word resonates with you, if you go, God, that's really important to me, go ahead and select it. What we know after 5,000 people have taken this assessment, is that the average person selects at least 30 words, 30 different values that they say are really important.
Hmm.
And that presents a significant challenge. If
Yes.
there are 30 things that are important to you, your human instinct is to try to honor them all. And
Mhm.
when you find that it is impossible to honor 30 things on a daily basis, you experience that feeling of failure, that you didn't honor those things, and you invite feelings like shame and depression and anxiety and all these things to sort of come to the party. And so what we do is we say, let's take that subset of 30, 40, 50 words, however many you selected, and let's group them together by likeness into 5 different buckets, right? So we have got things like empathy, sympathy, caring for others, that goes in one bucket. Things like achievement, success, accountability, that goes in another bucket. And before you know it, all of the words that you said were really important to you are sort of neatly organized into 5 different buckets. And then you get to pick the one word from each bucket that is your non-negotiable value. What's the one word you
Mhm.
can't live without? And that sort of brings you to your initial flock of 5 black sheep values.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. I know, you really opened up in the book, and, you allowed yourself to be, really, really vulnerable as well. Oh, and I appreciate you mentioning to watch Brene Brown. Really enjoyed the special. It was mad cool. And I mean, you mentioned it as pretty much being, I believe, your worst experience you've ever, faced. So I was wondering if you could share with us just a little bit of how the flock of 5 helped you grow just in this situation of, facing fear. I mean, you said
Yeah.
right flat out, worst experience you've ever
Yeah.
felt. I was like, wow, like
Yeah. You,
wow. So
yeah. You
if you
bet.
could share, I guess, how you use your flock of 6, I know, to go
Yeah. That's
ahead
right. That's
and
right.
just face this fear yourself.
The, the book was born out
Mm-hmm.
of the worst experience of my life. Right. And so
Mm-hmm.
in 2012, my oldest son, Theo, at the time was 14 years old and was diagnosed with this rare blood cancer and needed a bone marrow transplant in order to survive. And so that began like this 263-day harrowing experience, living in a hospital with him battling cancer. And we, at one point during the treatment, we had this crossroads that we had come to where he had received the bone marrow transplant, but he developed something called graft versus host disease, which is sort of where the marrow that's inserted in your body doesn't recognize the environment that it's been placed. And so it begins to attack the body.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way that you treat it is you super suppress your body's immune system so that it won't fight back. So they did that. They did that. The highest level of it's called GVHD. The highest level of GVHD is deadly. It will kill you. and that's where he was. And so they suppressed his immune system. And when they did that, he contracted this deadly fungus while he was in the hospital that had the exact opposite treatment. So we had two things that were threatening his life with opposite treatments. And so, we get called one evening into the parents' lounge, and there's a row of doctors sitting in there, and they look at my wife and I, and they say, "We are so sorry, but there's nothing else we can do. No matter what we treat, the other's going to take his life, and we don't think he's going to make it through the night. So you should probably go back to the room and say your goodbyes and call whoever you need to call." And so, when you are faced with that, and you have no idea what your non-negotiable values are, what do you base your decisions on? um, the truth for me was, you base it on emotion, which is the absolute worst thing you could do in that moment. Our emotions are unstable and constantly change, and you can't make decisions with regards to life and death on something like emotions. You just can't. You have to be rooted in these non-negotiables to make a comfortable decision that you feel good about. But I didn't have those things defined in my life at that point. So I went back, grabbed my wife's hand. We walked back to the room. We sat on the edge of his bed, and I fumbled through my way of trying to find the words to say goodbye. And it was just the single most awful experience of my life. And up to that point of my 40, I don't know, it's 42, 43 years that I had been on the planet. And you know to make a long story short, what ended up happening was, I called my younger brother, who lived 1,500 miles away, told him he wasn't going to have time to make it. So he says his goodbyes over the phone as well. He's incredibly distraught. But that evening, he decides he's going to film himself sitting on his couch holding up these poster boards in this Hail Mary attempt to find a solution. And he basically sits there and says, my nephew's dying. We're running out of time. Here's what's happening. Here's what we've tried. Here's what, we're looking for. If you have any ideas, please help us. And overnight, that video received over 500,000 views. And by the next morning, I was receiving calls from people from all over the world who had um, ideas. And one of them happened to be a doctor at MD Anderson in Houston. And he was an expert on this fungus that was killing Theo. And so they sort of put their heads together. I got another call from Dr. Tim Johnson from Good Morning America. And he said, "You tell your doctor anybody he wants to speak to, just get me a list and I'll try to make it happen in the next 24 hours. So we did that. And we made a list of a doctor at Dana-Farber in Boston. And there was a research scientist at Cornell University. And sort of the four doctors put their heads together and came up with this batshit crazy plan to try to save Theo's life. And it worked. And so, Theo is now 23 years old. He has conquered the cancer. He's dealing with other issues of all of sometimes the cure is worse than the disease. And so he's dealing with some of that stuff now.
Mhm.
But, the point of the story and the reason that the book exists is because even though we had a fairy tale ending, which we know does not happen, living in a pediatric oncology ward for a year, I spent at least 5 years going to bed every night with one thought going through my head, which is, I wonder if he thinks I gave up on him. And it's a valid question, even though he never asked it. It took me years after that to finally basically say, you know what, I'm tired of winging it in my life. I really need to figure out what these non-negotiables are, so that if I'm ever faced with that sort of decision again, I can lean on these things that I know won't change. And no matter what the outcome is, I can feel good that I made the best decision I could in that moment. And that's why I wrote the book, is because I feel like most of us are where I was. They just haven't had the unfortunate situation to sit on the edge of a bed and say goodbye to a child. I don't want them to ever have to experience that. But if they find themselves in some sort of incredibly difficult crossroads, what I want them to do is to be able to go, here are the 5 things that I need to honor. And as long as I honor those things, I've done my job. But when you don't have those things defined, you're going to flail and swirl and get caught up in an emotional tornado. And I promise you, you're going to beat the hell out of yourself for years because you will make bad decisions, just like I did. And so that's where the book came from. It's why I'm so passionate about it. I've devoted the rest of my life to making sure people discover these things, whether that's for your personal development or professional development, whether it's at home or at work, it doesn't matter. These are the literal rules that you should live your life by. And so that to me is my life's mission at this point, is to make sure people discover their flock.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. It always gets me in the feels every time, reading about that. Because
Awesome,
I've
man.
read the book at least twice now. I'm just like, every time it's just like, whoa, like such an intense experience. But, and
Wait till you
again,
hear the
yeah,
wait till you hear the audiobook.
yeah, for
The
sure.
audiobook is out here within the next 60 days, and
Okay, nice.
we scored the book like a movie.
Oh,
So
okay.
when you hear that story, it is supported by, orchestral arrangements, and like
Oof,
it is
nice.
crazy.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Hell yeah. Look forward to it then. Awesome. And I love how you mentioned in the book like how like the tightrope of like the F word and then your black sheep values and then F word being your feelings and how you have to
Yes.
like it's constantly like a tug of war and like a nice
Yeah.
balance between the two. I was like that
Yeah,
really interesting.
that's so the way that I try to, think through it in my head anyways,
Mhm.
is there's we spend every day of our lives in the middle of a tug of war between our values and our feelings, right? And they pull us back and forth. And the context that I try to provide when I'm thinking about that is sort of, on the values side is the past, in the feeling side it's the future, and in the middle it's the present, right? It's where we are
Okay.
today. And so what I have found is that, you know when we are sort of anxious because we can't predict the future, and our
Mhm.
feelings get all sort of swirled up because we're nervous or concerned about something that could happen, our black sheep ground us, they hold us, right, so that we don't get sucked into the future where anxiety lives. They actually dig their heels in and say, we're gonna stay here so that you can stay in the present. And that is incredibly important, because the only decisions we can make are in the present. You can't go backwards and make a decision, remake a decision from the past, and you can't transport yourself to the future and make your decision there. So the only thing that you can do is make a decision in the present. And when you understand that that's the case, it really helps. For me, it's a barometer to know where my head is at, right? Where's my mind at? If I'm feeling depressed, chances are I'm dwelling on something from the past. If I feel anxious, chances are I'm worried about something that hasn't happened yet, right? So if I'm not
Hmm.
anxious and I am not depressed, then I must be in the present. As long as I'm in the present, that's the only place I can affect change in my life. And so that is sort of, in my head, how I manage my feelings, is basically trying to ask myself, what am I feeling right now? And if I'm feeling upset, I know that I'm way back in the past. And if I'm, feeling incredibly nervous, then I know that I am more than likely projecting something that hasn't happened yet. And so that to me is just like a daily gut check of where I am and what's happening, to be able to control sort of my emotions in the moment.
Wow. Yeah. I love
That's
that.
Lao Tzu. That's a Lao Tzu quote, right? So here we have an ancient Chinese philosopher that says, if you're, his literal quote is, if you are depressed, yeah, you're living in the past. If you feel anxious, you're living in the future, and if you feel at peace, you're living in the present. And that is literally, in my head, the barometer of knowing where my mindset is in any given moment.
Hmm. Wow. That's crazy. That's awesome. No, and definitely like that. I think that one really connected with me just because growing up from like transitioning from like high school to college. So in college, I studied. Well, I studied percussion for quite some time. So I studied like drum set and all that. But then I also decided to do computer science, and so I've always felt like like trying to battle this balance between like logic and then like my feelings, And so like as soon as you said tightrope, I'm like, wow, I really did sort of think of it like a scale, but you like just saying tightrope was like Oh yeah, it's not like this weight thing. It's just trying to get it right. Like I
That
really
so
connected with
so
that.
in order to have a tightrope,
Mm-hmm.
you have to have tension on both sides,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's what you really need to sort of remember with that illustration is that, if you think of if you're in a tug of war between your feelings and your values, on the surface you would think you just want your values to win, right? And so
Yeah.
that they're going to pull your feelings off balance.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is you don't want either side to win. You just want both that tension to be right there to keep that tightrope nice and tight so you can actually travel between the two, between your values and your feelings. If you only made decisions based on your values and you ignored your feelings, you're never going to stay committed to that commitment, because our feelings are monsters and they have the power to overtake. I don't care what you think you value in your life. If you get mad enough, if you get upset enough, they will overtake any sense of value. And on the opposite side, if you make decisions solely based in your emotions, then there's a really good chance you might make a decision that violates one of those values. So you won't keep your commitment there either. And so the idea is you've got to keep this healthy tension between values and feelings, and it keeps that tightrope nice and tight so that you could walk it. If you've ever tried to do anything like that and there was any slack in the rope, you're not making it across that tightrope. You're going to fall every single time. So you've got to keep it nice and taut. And that's that healthy tension that exists between values and feelings.
Wow. Yeah. Definitely appreciate that. Um. Now, and then you mentioned in there briefly how you pretty much can't be like a control freak with like your decisions. And
Mhm.
I was like I felt like you were speaking to me there too, because it was like, wait, I am a bit of control freak. I'm the oldest of three single moms, so it's like I've always had to just make decisions and just control everything. And so like
Yeah.
you mentioned how I mean, I'll let you explain, but you mentioned how, I guess, how do you know when you've made like a good decision without, I guess, being a control freak?
So let me say this first. As the oldest of three, with a single mom, I promise you that you have been conditioned to care for other people's sheep. Okay, so that's not good or bad. That's powerful information that you need to know because of the sheer scenario of how you were raised. You had some serious responsibility with that, which means that you've just been conditioned to care for other people's sheep. And why that's important is if you ignore your own sheep, you get yourself into trouble. And if you're so busy caring for everybody else's and there's no food left for yours, your life can spiral. And that's why it's important for you to realize that you have a natural tendency to care for other people's sheep. And so that is something, just keep it here, because I promise you that is the case. And that when you look and try to find your flock of five, I guarantee you at least one or two of the things that you said were your non-negotiable values aren't yours. They're either one of your siblings, or there's something else there because you've been conditioned to care for other people's sheep out of necessity. And that is good on you for accepting that responsibility and doing it. But you have to know that it takes food off the table for what matters most to you. So just keep that in your mind as you're thinking through these things. A good decision, so I define a good decision as one that is born from these black sheep values. It considers all of the facts that you can get your hands on, not just the truth in the room. And it honors what you're feeling in the moment. And that sort of goes to what we just talked about, right? So, this idea is, as a control freak for myself, and I would challenge anybody to a control freak contest because I joke all the time, Ryan, that you could invite me to dinner and I'd say yes, and I'd drive your car, because that's the level of control that I want in my life. And so it's difficult to manage at times, but the most difficult truth that I had to accept was, we don't control outcomes. And I fought that and bucked that for a long time because I want to believe that I can control outcomes. But the science tells me otherwise, right? The science says that if you try to determine whether a decision is good or bad and you are using an outcome to determine that, that's something called outcome bias. And it doesn't work that way. Unless you're a wizard, unless you're Gandalf or Glinda or so, some powerful wizard that I am unaware of, you do not have the ability to control outcomes. The only thing you have is the ability to control the deliberate intention that goes into making a decision. Once the decision is made, it's out of your hands. And so once I finally accepted that and I removed whether I felt good or bad about something from an outcome and instead shifted it to honoring these things that matter most to me, making sure I had a good sort of group of data to make this decision on it. And I also acknowledged how I was feeling in the moment. I know that's the best I can do and I feel good. It's a good decision, regardless of the outcome. The outcome could be shit, but at least I made a great decision because it was born out of these things that matter most to me. I honored all of those things. I considered everything I could get my hands on. And this is something else that is sort of in the middle. We have a tendency to focus on the values part and the feelings part, but in the middle of that is this information part, And in Theo's case, if I would have listened to the doctors who put us in that room and said, we're out of options, he's going to die, then he would have died. But the truth was that the truth was bigger than the room. They just didn't know the answer. That doesn't mean it was the truth. It means the truth in the room was not accurate. And so I have to go beyond the room. I always equate it to, in the book, to like a real estate app on your phone, right? If you've ever searched through Zillow or any of these apps that you sort of find to search for real estate, if you say, I want a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, 2,000 square feet. I want a half an acre lot. I want a pool. I want this. And you start digging down to everything that you want. You narrow and narrow and narrow and narrow your focus. And then you go ahead and hit search and you go, there's only 2 houses and I can't afford either one of them. So my life is over, right? But if you just went beyond the room, that truth in the room, if you said, you know what, I'm going to maybe expand my search by half a mile. You know what, I am going to say, we're going to take a pool out and we can always add it later as long as there's room. Oh, all of a sudden there's 20 choices, 30 choices, 40 choices, not the 2 that you thought were the truth. You just had to look beyond the truth in that specific set of parameters. And when we did that through my brother's video that he made and uploaded to YouTube, we found an answer they told us didn't exist. And so that is really important in this decision-making process. It's you've got to know what matters most, because that's the foundation of which you're going to start this decision-making process. You've got to look to see if the truth you have is the truth in the room or is it bigger? And then you have to honor what you're feeling, because remember, if we don't acknowledge what we're feeling, doesn't mean resolve. It just means acknowledge. If you are upset, if you are excited, if you are concerned, whatever that feeling is, and you don't acknowledge it, I promise you, it's going to, in Hulk style, rip its clothes off and start beating on its chest. And it's going to challenge your commitment to that decision. So when we acknowledge it and say, I get it, I'm not completely 100% feeling like this might be it, but I do feel like it could be the right decision. I know that I'm not 100% comfortable with it, right? As long as we acknowledge it, we sort of keep it in check. And so when that is the case, when we ask ourselves why we're feeling that way, we can always go back to the values. Am I uncomfortable because I violated one of these non-negotiables, or is it something else? And so when we are able to sort of check all of those things and we remove whether or not we feel it's good or bad from an outcome, man, we have total control over the decisions that we make. And that's the best we can do. And that's what allows you to go to bed at night feeling like you did the right thing.
Yeah, definitely. Wow. Just, wow. Like each one is just like, oh my gosh. So I was hoping you could go ahead and paint like a clear picture for kintsugi. It's supposed to be the golden repair. And I thought that was like, again, I mean, another just mind blowing, like, whoa, moment. So if you could go ahead and share with us kintsugi.
Yeah. So, how can I frame this? So I've spent a lot of time in my earlier life trying to not get broken, trying to protect myself from being broken, right? And it takes a lot of effort. It's exhausting to try to protect yourself from being broken. Uh, a few years ago, I came across this article. There's been many, many books written about it. This is something that has existed for thousands of years. Um, it is a concept called kintsugi, which is an ancient Japanese philosophy and also a specific way in which to fix broken pottery. So the story goes there was an ancient Japanese shogun. I want to say it was in the 1400s. That it's in the book. That much I can know. If you want the actual facts and the
Yes.
name of the shogun, it's there. But there was this shogun who had his favorite tea bowl broken, and so he sent it off to be repaired, and it came back with these ugly staples in it, and it just was nothing like what it was before it got broken. And so he's like, this is unacceptable. I just want this to look like it did. And so he sends it out to a bunch of local artisans, and he says, I don't care what you have to do, but it's got to look better than this. So they made a choice, and the choice was, rather than try to make it look like it never got broke, what else could they do? And they went out and they discovered that they were going to find the most valuable resource they had at that time, which was gold. They melted down the gold and they used the gold to repair and fill in the cracks of the broken pottery. In doing so, they did two things. Number one, they made the bowl more valuable than before it was broken, because now it's laced with gold. And secondly, they honored the history of the bowl. They told the bowl's story. And there's been many, many things written about kintsugi and the philosophy, and there are people who literally live their lives by it. But for me, and the work that I do around values, the sort of revelation that I came to was, if you truly want to be unbreakable, then the first thing you have to realize is you're already broken. And when you accept that you're already broken, you can stop trying to protect yourself and instead focus on what's holding the brokenness together. Now, in the case of kintsugi and the shogun's tea bowl, it was the most valuable resource they could get their hands on, which was gold. But for you in your life, the most valuable resource that you possess are these non-negotiable black sheep values. And so when you focus on that and understand that it is these black sheep values that hold your brokenness together, man, that's what truly makes you unbreakable. And you don't have to worry about protecting yourself from all of these potential things that might hurt you. You actually own the glue that keeps the brokenness together.
Wow. Yeah, definitely. And for anybody that wants to reference it in the book, I know it's on page 74, because I notated it there. I was like 74, because I was just like, whoa, like that, because for me, that's a new concept I never heard of. So I was like, wow, that's amazing. Um, Now, you also mentioned with a practical manifestation through intentional execution of your black sheep, and I was hoping you could clarify a bit more on how you would go ahead and like you mentioned sort of like using your black sheep values day to day
Mhm.
intentionally, and just again practical manifestation up with those black sheep values. If you could share a little bit of how you intentionally do it on a day to day basis.
Yeah, there are several schools of thought with regards to manifestation. There are some who believe that you can just put things out, put
Hmm.
these vibrations out into the world, and I want my Lamborghini, I want my mansion, I want my and good on them. That is not my approach.
Hmm.
I can't convince myself. It would take me an enormous amount of energy to get me to believe that that works.
Hmm.
Um, I don't believe in a prosperity gospel of any kind like that. What I do believe is in practical manifestation, which to me it means that you're acting with deliberate intention. So rather than discovering these things that are your non-negotiable values and hoping that they have an opportunity to appear somewhere in your life, that is still winging it. So you've got to take control by looking at your calendar every single day and coming up with a plan. So if you looked at my calendar, you would not just see times and appointments and names. You would see my black sheep written into each appointment time as to which ones I am going to manifest during that conversation. So for instance, with something like this, you would look and you'd see your name. It would say Ryan Perez right here, and it would show our appointment time at 8 a.m. this morning. And next to it, you would see words like creativity, hope, and impact. Why? Well, because those are the three things that I want to make sure come across during this interview. I'm not going to leave it to chance or accident. I am going to speak those values into existence. And I've been incredibly deliberate with my language today to make sure that you've experienced those things. I'm not winging it, even though I don't have a script, even though I'm not following something that I've written before this. I am sitting here going, I need to make sure that the words that come out of my mouth are creative, that they inspire hope, and that they have the type of impact that I want them to have both on you and anybody who's going to listen to this. And so I promise you, when we finish this interview, the last thing you're going to hear out of my mouth is going to be something incredibly hopeful, because I'm being incredibly deliberate with my intention to make sure that that is the case. If I didn't feel like that was possible, if I didn't have the opportunity to speak these things into existence, you and I would not be having this conversation this morning. I would have said no, and I would not have given it a second thought, because if that was the case, it would have violated one of my values. And when something violates the values, there's no guilt, there's no shame, there's no nothing. It's just, you know what? That's not my thing, and I don't feel bad about it. So practical manifestation is not just understanding and knowing what these non-negotiable values are. It's you taking the time to honor them every single day. And this is, let me tell you the sort of an incredible story that will hopefully get you to understand why this is so important. So, I wrote the book. The book it comes out. We have this launch party where before the book comes out, I have a launch group of 40 people that I run through a 5-week group coaching program to get them to discover their black sheep, prove they're real, speak them into existence, everything that you've heard from me today. During the process, one of my students comes to me and says, "Hey, did you know that sheep recognize the voice of their shepherd?" And I'm like, "Oh, don't tell me that. Don't tell me that, because it's going to piss me off, because if that's true, it should be in the book, and it's not in the book." And so I do some research, and what I find out is that it's actually partially true. So the truth is, sheep recognize the voice of the person that feeds them, but sheep have short-term memory. So what does that mean? The reason that I want you to feed these black sheep values every single day is so that when you need them, when you call on them, they recognize your voice and they are there for you. That's why we do it every day. You can't come to me and go, "Hey man, I had a great day today. I fed four of my 5 black sheep." I'm going to say, "That's a shit day." You'd never come to me and say, "I fed 4 of my 5 children today. It was a pretty good day," right? You'd never say that. You have to think of these things in the same way, knowing that the more that you feed them, the more they recognize your voice, and the more they're going to run to you when you need whatever that is. For me, when I need creativity, when I need hope and impact and empathy and family and authenticity and all those things that are my black sheep, if I feed them every day, I know they'll be there when I call for them. Here's the challenge, and here's why I told you this is something you have to be aware of, because you're conditioned to care for other people's sheep. If you are caring for someone else's sheep and you call out, guess who else shows up looking for food? It's all these other people's sheep, because they recognize your voice and they want food. And it's a distraction from you honoring the things that matter the most to you. So in that light, you've got to make sure that you know what yours are. I have zero problem with you feeding other people's sheep. What I have a problem with is you taking them into your care and pretending that they're yours. They're not yours. If you want to feed them with whatever you have left over after yours have had a chance to eat. My feeling on the subject is all of our sheep don't get fed the same amount every day. Okay. Some get a 7-course meal, some get table scraps. That's just the way life works. But that doesn't mean that they don't eat. They all get to eat something every day, and that should be your goal. So if you have your calendar out there and you're writing all your values in, but there's not a good fit for one of your values, then you better come up with a plan to honor and feed that sheep, even though it doesn't actually have a nice little convenient place to stick it in your calendar for the day. There are some people that do daily meditation, or they, read the Bible, or they go for a walk or a hike, or they decide they're going to hit the gym that day, whatever it is. Those are all different ways to feed a very specific sheep. And so if your calendar doesn't allow for all of them to be fed, you have to come up with a plan to make sure they get some sort of food that day. Even if it's a 5-minute whatever, that is still enough to keep them engaged. And that's the goal.
Okay, yeah, definitely seeing like how that connects too. Is like, wow, like that's nuts. Um, and then just last question. I know we're like out of time. Just so I also studied percussion, and then have a lot of friends, who really devoted their life and passion to it. And then being an artist yourself, specifically, I guess when you first started, I was curious how you would say you first developed your networking skills with others, especially when you first start, just because I feel like that's always like the hardest part of the journey.
Yeah. So it is a journey.
Hmm.
And to be honest with you, like I've never, I guess the closer that I've come to owning my swagger, the easier it's been to network. When you're unsure of yourself, it makes it hard, right?
That's true. Yeah.
Um, Even if you're a jack of all trades, I participate a lot in this clubhouse on the app Clubhouse.
Yes.
There's a group called the
Hmm.
Misfit Mafia, and in that club that's run by a brilliant friend of mine. His name is Brian Fanzo. Brian describes himself as a multi-hyphenate, right? Which is somebody who has lots of interest in different things and is very skilled in different things. They're not this one particular thing. The challenge with being a multi-hyphenate is that the layman's term would be you're a jack of all trades, right?
Hmm.
Well, you're a jack of all trades, you're a master of none. And so the
Yeah.
idea is, can you find the confidence within yourself to know that you know enough that you feel comfortable networking with others, right? If you are an expert in something, you feel pretty comfortable that no matter what someone says or how they're going to engage you, you have got an expert opinion on what you feel about that particular thing. But when you're a jack of all trades and you know this much about that much,
Yeah.
um, it can be challenging to feel the confidence.
Hmm.
So, sort of growing up, spending 20 years in the music business, literally as a rock star, you learn to develop that swagger so that even on a bad night, you still come off as you rock that stage. People got a good show. You didn't show them that you weren't feeling it. You let your swagger carry you, and some nights it carries you more than others. So what I would say is get comfortable in what you know. And if you are not comfortable in what you know, hit the books and start studying so that you get comfortable with what you know. That's going to help your ability to network, right? It's not about relationships. And I think that's what a lot of us consider it to be. For networking, right? So if I'm networking, it's really about value. It's about what value do I add to the conversation. And if I can bring value, and that's my only goal, is to just add value, you're going to find that your network grows incredibly fast and in areas of which you never thought possible. If you enter networking with a what's in it for me, you're going to get kicked in the nuts and it's going to hurt.
Yeah.
You can't approach it that way. You've got to approach it with what value can I add to this conversation? It's in service of whomever I'm going to meet. So as long as it's in service of them and you're adding value to them, believe me, your network will take care of itself. The minute you switch focus to I'm going to do this because I get X,
Yeah.
it's the beginning of the end.
Okay. Cool. And then really just what's your currently right now your favorite coffee, and then just any I guess any last words you want to go ahead and share with the audience.
Yeah. So I'm a coffee freak.
Yes.
I got a problem.
Hmm.
So I have some rules when it comes to coffee, but the basic rules are I have to know I want to know where the beans come from because I have a preference from certain areas of the world. So I'm a Colombian guy. So I prefer Colombian coffee over anything else.
Yeah.
Um, every time I think I like something else, I go back and have Colombian coffee and go, yeah, no, it's Colombian coffee that I like, right? So Colombian first, yes. The second thing is I have to know it's ethically sourced, right? I have to know that the coffee industry is notorious for slave labor in different parts of the world, and I want to make sure that the people picking those beans are offered a fair wage and they're being treated humanely. And so I get really picky about the farms that the coffee comes from, and if it doesn't have a fair trade stamp or some sort of a supply chain that I can track, then I don't drink that coffee. And then finally, I for myself, I'm a mood guy too. So if I'm having if I'm
Yeah.
really not in a good mood, I got to be careful when I drink my coffee because I will project that mood into the coffee, and all of a sudden it becomes very bitter to me. But that to me is yeah. I belong to a few coffee clubs, and so I get sent these different pounds of coffee on a monthly basis. I just There's a company out of the UK called the Colombian Coffee Company, and they actually send these really sort of curated bags of coffee to me all the time. I got it as a gift from a friend, and all of a sudden I'm addicted to it, and so I look forward to receiving those bags every month. But I guess my parting words is this: um, no matter what you think is possible in your life, I promise you it's greater than what you think. I believe the only way to get there is to discover these things. And if I would have discovered my non negotiable black sheep values when I was your age, I'd be a friggin' billionaire by now. I believe that with my whole heart. I believe that the quicker you discover these things, the more you start to define where your superpowers are, and you lean into them and are allowed this ability to speak them into existence. When you do that, you have no idea what's possible because you don't control outcomes. So instead of worrying so much on what you want to get, how much money you want to make, forget about all of that stuff. Those things will happen when you honor the things that matter most to you, because when you do that, you are living this authentic life that gets you everybody's first look. The end of the farmer's story is this: even though farmers don't value black sheep in the same way they do the rest of the flock, they still possess enormous value, but in a very different way. Farmers keep one black sheep for every 100 white sheep in their care. They keep them as a marker. So every morning, the sheep farmer wakes up, they look out over their flock. If they've got 500 sheep in their care, they look for 5 black sheep. If they don't see the 5 black sheep, they know something is wrong. It's famine, it's wolf, it's a disease, it's something, right? But it's the black sheep's ability to stand out from the 495 other sheep that get the farmer's first look every single day. If you want to get someone's first look, you have to lead with what makes you that unique, authentic original that you are, which means you need to be working, living, manifesting through these black sheep values that are uniquely yours. They're not mine, they're yours. And when you lead with them, people notice it and you separate yourself from the pack. And when you do that, I promise you, what you think is possible in your life grows exponentially, and you start to go, I'm just going to honor these things and see what happens. There is nothing more powerful for you to experience. And I hope that anyone listening today decides they want to start that journey today.
Wow. Wow. Definitely. Well, truly appreciate it. Thank you for sharing so much knowledge and wisdom. Wow. And just thank you for your time. Truly do appreciate it, man. Thank you.
But I'm sorry it's taken this long. I know we've jumped
No,
through about 12 hoops. I appreciate your tenacity.
absolutely.
I am in your corner. I will be here cheering, and anything I can do for you, you just name it and it's done.
Really appreciate it, man. Wow.
You
Thank
got
you.
it, brother.
Thank you, man.
You
Take
bet.
care. Stay safe, all
You
right?
too.
Bye.
You too.
I hope you enjoyed today's experience with Brant Menswar. Make sure to follow and leave a review of your favorite concept from today's discussion. You can find more DevNation content on our social media linked in the description, as well as a link to Brant Menswar and his book, Black Sheep. Remember, it's a great day to have a great day. Thanks for tuning in.